One of the things we've been following since Joe Biden announced he will not be seeking re-election and endorsed Kamala Harris is the quick, as I've said many times, coalescing around Kamala Harris as the presumptive nominee. It will be made official at the convention if it stays on track as it seems to be. But since that became clear, in the last 24 hours, we've been watching MAGA lose their ever-loving mind. And we've covered different elements of this already. Now I want to focus on the legal argument they've been making. Let me go ahead and, before bringing in our legal expert, Aaron Parnas, to assess the validity of this argument for MAGA, let's hear it from Mike Johnson.
President Biden is facing rising calls to exit the race. Democrats are looking into potential legal hurdles to replacing their nominee so late in the process. Do you think that whoever emerges from the Democratic convention as that party's nominee for president and vice president, do you think those people should be on the ballot in all 50 states? Or would you support efforts to sue to keep those nominees off state ballots, assuming it's not President Biden and Vice President Harris?
Look, I'm a former litigator, a constitutional law attorney. I've just made note in some comments over the last week that they have real problems. I mean, every state has their own election system. That's our constitutional system. That's the way it's done. And in some of these states, it's a real hurdle. They have a real problem of replacing the nominee at the top of the ticket. Remember, Jake, Joe Biden was chosen after a long, small d Democratic process by 14 million people emerging through that primary. It will be very interesting to see if the so-called party of democracy, the Democrats, go into a back room somewhere and switch it out and put someone else at the top of the ticket. I think they've got legal hurdles in some of these states, and it'll be litigated, I would expect, on the ground there. And
so, Aaron, I want to get your response to that. What the heck is he trying to argue? Is there any validity to, because of how late Biden decided not to run, somehow Kamala Harris wouldn't be legitimately put on the ballot? What's the situation there? And break that down for us.
Yeah, so this really seems like a quintessential case of buyer's remorse here from Mike Johnson and the Republican Party. I think that they geared up to run against President Biden, and now that Biden's no longer on the ticket, they're scrambling to find an alternative solution. Now, the legal challenges he is talking about are the fact that Republicans are going to argue that Democratic voters were disenfranchised, that Kamala Harris was not on the primary ballot, and therefore she cannot be the Democratic nominee, essentially, that Joe Biden was the one who received over 14 million votes during the primary election, and therefore he should be the nominee, and Kamala would be kicked off the ballot. But there are a number of issues with that argument. The first issue is the fact that Republicans don't have what is called standing. They don't have an injury here because they're not a Democratic voter. They don't have standing to pursue a lawsuit to kick Kamala off the ballot for not being able to vote for her because they weren't going to vote for her in the first place. They were voting in the Republican primary, so they wouldn't have standing to pursue lawsuits, number one. Number two, there is no legal challenge to the fact that Kamala Harris wasn't on the ballot and Joe Biden was. The way the Democratic Party sets the rules, not each state or not the United States federal government. The Democratic Party sets the rules for its primary nominating contest, and the rules were followed. And as part of those rules, the delegates come together and will select a nominee at the convention next month. That has nothing to do with state election law or federal election law. That's the Democratic Party's process, just like the Republican Party has its own process. So Mike Johnson and Republicans can't essentially challenge the Democratic Party's process because everything is being followed by the book. And this isn't the first time Democrats have replaced a nominee midway through an election year, even after primaries were over. It's happened in 1968, it's happened before, and it's perfectly valid to happen now.
Wow. And we really do understand. I want to acknowledge we're debunking there what I perceive as a bogus argument, but there is gravity to this decision. It's very significant. As I explained in other segments, there is a sadness to it. People did select Biden. He has been governing so effectively. But now that he made this decision, the idea that now Republicans are going to come in and say, no, wait, as Aaron Parnas just mentioned, they don't even have a reason. They don't have a legal argument that's strong. But also on a more emotional, personal level, it's hilarious to imagine them saying, we really are worried about Democratic voters being disenfranchised, when that's sort of their whole thing. They love that. And isn't it sort of contradictory, Aaron, that they were just arguing it was such an affront to democracy that based on Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, individuals, groups were suing to see if they could get Trump kicked off the ballot if that part of the Constitution applied to him. And then they were saying just even the idea, regardless of the constitutional argument, the idea that you would try to get a candidate kicked off the ballot is a horrible attack on democracy, regardless of the reasoning. Now they're interested in doing it themselves.
It's very hypocritical, Luke. I mean, it's hypocrisy 101. I think that Republicans are really concerned here, right? Republicans have nominated Donald Trump, who is a convicted felon, solely for the purpose of defeating Joe Biden. That was their goal. That's why Donald Trump became the nominee. I guarantee you that if Joe Biden was not running 2 years ago, I don't know that Donald Trump would be the nominee today. But now that Donald Trump is the nominee, and now that J.D. Vance is his running mate, there's no going back. Republicans cannot go back and choose a new nominee or choose a new VP. They are stuck with the Trump-Vance ticket, one that is completely out of touch with what Americans want. Now they're no longer running against Joe Biden. They're running against Kamala Harris and a likely more moderate vice presidential pick. And the Trump campaign just simply isn't ready for that. Republicans are simply not ready for that because they can't use the same attack lines that they would against Joe Biden, against Kamala Harris, and it's showing. So it's really desperation, grasping at straws. And Luke, I mean, between you and me, hypocrisy is the name of the game for Republicans. This isn't surprising that they would try to go down this path, but it's not going to work. Ultimately, Kamala Harris will be the nominee. She will surpass any legal challenges, and she will be on the ballot against Donald Trump in November.
Wow. One more clip, and then I have a sort of related legal question for you.
Lawsuits, plenty of numerous lawsuits.
Well, look, if it violates the rules in some of these states, I expect that there will be litigation over that. So we'll see how it develops. We're doing our job here in Washington. The states will be handling that. But I do think it's problematic. I think millions of the American people believe that this is problematic. This is not the way the system is supposed to work. There's a reason it's unprecedented. You don't just, steamroll the rules and the process because you decide that your candidate is no longer suitable. That's what's happened here. I think everybody can see it for themselves, and we'll see how the campaign unfurls.
Congressman, what do you make of that comment from the speaker saying there's going to be litigation in all these states?
It's laughable. I was having a hard time not going with a big belly laugh here. Just who the hell does he think he is? Messing with the Democrats, the Republicans, whining about now they've got a very serious problem. They've got a candidate on the Democratic side that is going to whip the Republicans. We've got a prosecutor that is going to be taking on a certified felon in the presidential election. And I understand why they're so concerned. Just who do they think they are messing around in the Democratic politics? They can't even take care of themselves. So let's get out of there, Mike Johnson. Pay attention to your own party and don't go messing around with the Democratic Party. It's all legal. Of course, this is the Trump playbook, isn't it? When you're going down, start suing. Get the lawyers out there and start suing. More of the same.
And is the Democratic Party prepared for this?
Of course we are. Of course we are.
Yeah, so I already addressed that before. The other question that was on my mind was, how are we seeing I remember there were some legal questions around campaign finance. How is that playing out? The tens of millions of dollars, I saw some reporting that it is getting switched over to Kamala Harris. Is that all being smoothly worked out? Meaning the money that had been raised for Biden easily transitioning over to being money that can be spent on behalf of Kamala Harris?
Yeah, for 100%. So for those who don't really know the way the campaign finance structure works in a presidential, so the Biden campaign itself is an entity, right? It's raised about $96 million to date. That's not including what's been raised over the past 24 hours. Then you have a number of other entities like the Biden Victory Fund and the DNC that are separate entities, but they work with the Biden campaign essentially to support the Biden campaign. So the Biden campaign itself, that $96 million war chest, was easily switched over to the Kamala Harris for President campaign, and the entities have already been switched. That's already been done. Regarding all the other money, that money will be set aside for whoever the Democratic nominee is in November. But given the fact that Democrats have quickly coalesced around Kamala, she likely will have enough delegates to secure the nomination this week. That money will be easily used to support her as well. So it's a very intertwined kind of situation, and it's a very streamlined situation. I think it would have been a lot more difficult if the nominee was not Kamala Harris. You would have seen a lot more kind of jumping through hoops to make this campaign finance situation work. But because she was already on the ticket and because the transition is a lot more seamless, it was pretty easy and it's already been done.
Good to hear. Aaron, thank you always for your insight. Where can people find you?
On all my social platforms, just at Aaron Parnas.